fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Michael Hawley is in the room. You've had a busy week.
Oh, yeah. How you doing, Al?
I'm doing okay. What's going on with you? You
Combination remodeling, and then I'm doing, actually, there's a documentary on the Ripper suspect that I researched, and so I've been hanging out with the producer, and it's quite a chore.
Oh, you have to actually work, hey? I mean,
yeah. I'm always saying, well, that's not correct. That's factually incorrect. I think he's bothered. He's bummed about me.
And who's that producer? Isn't that Figs, or who is that?
Yes. John West and Jason Figgis is the director. So, yeah, they're doing Dr. Dacre Stoker's thing, too.
Right. He keeps sending me a message asking me how I can put up with you.
Barely.
I keep saying, well, I drink a lot.
I crack slow.
Yeah, and that's the best thing. I told him just start with a 6-pack, give you some beer. After about 3 or 4 beer, you'll be real easy to deal with. But he keeps not listening to me. So
I'm telling you.
Well, let's get on with this. Now, today we've got a mystery writer, and she's written the first book of her series of 2, it looks like, a blue water mystery, and it's The Dead Lie. Ivanka Fear, thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Let's talk about the premise of the series, first of all. What is the basic premise in this story?
Right. Well, it's about a young woman who has a traumatic incident from her past, and that seems to follow her throughout her life and haunt her. So in The Dead Lie, she is at a point where it's 11 years past that traumatic incident, and she's thinking, well, by now I can put that behind me and I can move on and everything is okay. So she goes back to her hometown, which is in Hamilton, Ontario, to visit her parents. However, she discovers that it's not safe to go back home. So there's that, I guess there's that idea of you can never go back home. She visits her parents, and some strange things happen, which she sort of just brushes aside. But then her parents are killed in a car crash. And so she's wondering, does that have something to do with her past? Is she responsible for their deaths? However, as she's going through their things, she discovers that they've kept some secrets of their own. And that makes her wonder, is there something in her parents' past that has caused their accidents? Or is it simply an accident? She doesn't really believe that. But she wants to get down to the bottom of the truth about all this. So she decides to go back to where her parents are from, which is Croatia. And there she uncovers some things in their history. And I'll leave it at that.
So do you write from the first person point of view? Is this from your main character's point of view? This
book is, yes. This series is. It's actually a 5-book series. I have 2 books out at the present time, but there are more to come.
So when you do a series like that, you say 5 books, is it mapped out already? Did you have that kind of set as 5 books and kind of where you're going to go and how it's going to end? Or is this, you're doing it per book now?
I actually started out with this short story, which came from an idea, and that's where the character was born, was in the short story. And in the short story, I found that there was a lot more to her story to tell, and so it became a novel. And then that wasn't finished, and so it became another novel, and it kept on growing from there. So I'm at the point where I have 5 books to tell her story, and I can see extending that even further. So it's kind of her life story and how this past trauma follows her.
So 5 books, it might be more than 5 books?
Well, I have a 5-book contract, so hopefully it will be at least 5, perhaps more. I don't know. We'll see.
So when you say you have a lot more to tell and it kind of goes out, maybe describe your experience with your main character. Like, do you hear your main character? Do you see the character like a movie? How does that work for you?
She's in my head, so when she's speaking to herself, her own thoughts, I hear her thoughts. When she's speaking to other people, I hear the dialogue between the two of them in conversation. And I don't know if I really visualize her so much as just her thoughts or her the sentences are there. Obviously she's formed full sentences. She's speaking to people, her thoughts in her head. I can hear what she's thinking. I don't know that I actually see her. When I try to visualize her, she seems to be a mix of different people that I know from movies or so on. So she's just, she's this person, that one kind of put together. And on any given day or any given time, I see her in a different way. She's also, throughout the series, at a different age. So here she's just turning 30. And later on, she does age through the series. So the way I perceive her changes throughout the books.
Right. So in a way, your character has control over where the story goes.
They totally do. Yes. She takes control. I've created this character, and she's just told me her story. Exactly. That can be a challenge when I'm trying to write it in a certain direction, of course, and she comes out and says or does something that throws me off track, and then we go off and maybe in a different direction.
Do you guys actually have a battle, fight it out, yell at each other?
I sometimes really wonder about her choices, let's put it that way. She has made some very bad life choices, starting from when she was 18 or 19, this traumatic incident in her past. It all goes back to that. And as she moves forward and as she ages, it seems like she just doesn't seem to learn her lesson. I just wonder about her sometimes. I shake my head at her and you've been through this before. Maybe it's time to grow up and learn, right? You
said that her parents might be involved with that as well?
Her parents have a history that she didn't know about until after their deaths. So that's all unraveled in The Dead Lie. So her parents they've lied to her by omission. They haven't told her the whole truth about themselves. So she discovers this, and that, along with the trauma that she suffered when she was 18 or 19, of course, the revelation from going to Croatia, that is added on to the trauma she's already had. So she carries that going forward into the next books in the series.
How much of yourself do you think goes into your main character?
I'd say quite a bit. They say you should write what you know. And so I started with that. Her background is similar to mine. She's Croatian by background, Canadian. I'm Slovenian by background, which is, on the border of Croatia. I have relatives both in Croatia and Slovenia. I was born there, but I'm a Canadian. So, we share a background. Some of the phobias that I mention in the book are phobias that I have as well. So I put some of my personality into her. She's an introverted person, yet she's very nosy and needs to get to the bottom of every story. She's actually a reporter in her small town. So she's not above knocking on doors and finding out the truth, but she does have trouble with personal relationships. She has phobias about beginning in small spaces, going up in the heights. So heights and claustrophobia are a couple of the issues that she has to deal with. But again, she's not me. If I were to tell the story of me, myself, it would be pretty boring, I would say. I don't have a totally interesting life to write about. So, of course, a lot of it is, you start with what you know and then you make up the rest. So she's got some aspects of me in her, obviously, but she's a completely different person, really.
Well, how do we know it's not really you?
Well, I guess you have to, pick out the parts that you think might be me, and the things that seem a little far-fetched probably aren't.
Or there probably are.
Oh, could be. You just never know, right? Authors write what they know.
Well, yeah. So how do you get into the fear and the, let's say, the suspense, action, the thriller part of the book? Are you conscious of how you write that on the page? I don't think I'm very conscious of anything I write down on the page. I'm more of a pantser than anything. So the ideas and the scenes, the action, conversation all just flows. I start with, an idea, premise, and then I let my character take it from there. So things happen to my character and the people around her, not necessarily that I can lead them down that path, but we get there and then it just seems to roll. I don't have any conscious way of developing the action or suspense. I think probably the one thing I do notice is that my chapters can be short, where there's a lot of, that creates a lot of suspense, where there are a lot of things going on at once. And so we'll have one chapter where this is happening and it switches to a different scene maybe.
and that sort of thing keeps it rolling.
So that's kind of difficult. It flows like that, but you have it planned to 5 books. So there's planning, but then there's just flowing.
The 5 books have been written, so I did that. And again, I didn't do it in a planned logical order, because that's not the way my mind works.
Oh, so they have been written, all of them.
They happened. I started with the first book that I wrote actually hasn't been published yet. It's going to be the 4th one in the series. So that 4th book actually evolved from the short story that I mentioned where my character was created. I had a premise. My character was put into a situation that she had to deal with. And then from that story, I wrote this novel, my first novel, which will be the 4th. After that, I wanted to extend her story, so I wrote the second novel, which will actually be the 5th in the series. And at that point, I thought, okay, maybe it's done now. But the way my mind works, I went backwards. So I wrote a prequel to her story. So she had this time where she was 18, 19 with this traumatic incident. She jumped forward in my first novel to being a woman in her middle-aged woman, and the repercussions of what happened to her when she was 18 or 19. I wanted to explore that. Having done that, and having put her into a new situation where the past is ever present and haunting her, I thought, well, there's something in between there that's missing. She has a whole life story. So I went from my first book and my sequel to that book backwards to write the prequel, which took place several years before. And of course, I wasn't done telling her story, so I went back another step and wrote a prequel to the prequel. This book right here, The Dead Lie, is actually the 4th book that I wrote. And at that point, I went into the middle between the prequels and the sequels and wrote what's going to be the next book in the series, book 3, was the 5th one that I wrote. So that seems like it's kind of all over the place, and that's exactly the way my writing flows.
And how do you get your settings and dialogue correct in the sense of, I know they're giving it to you, but to make sure the verbiage fits for the time, because you're going back in time and up forward and moving all around at different points of her life, you got to make sure that everything's correct. You know what I mean? Right.
So in The Dead Lie, this is where she's, so the books are chronological now in the way they're being published. So here she's going on 30, 11 years after the incident. The things that happen here, so I'm reflecting back on, when I was that age, and reflecting back on the visits that I had to Slovenia and Croatia back around that time probably. And so I'm able to use that in my writing. And then as she progresses through in book 2, she's in Northern Ontario. So again, I'm using information from when I lived there as a young child with my parents and the stories that they told me about what it was like there. And moving forward to the stories that take place when she's a middle-aged woman, I think that's where I put more of myself and the way I would speak probably into it, the way I would be speaking now. The settings are a different story. The settings, I take places, like with my characters, I take places that are real and that I know something of, and then I fictionalize them. So in the Dead Lie, when I'm talking about Hamilton, of course, that's a real city in Ontario, but the Northern Ontario town that she's from, Lake Kipling, is based on a real place, based on Kirkland Lake up in Northern Ontario, but it's not Kirkland Lake. I call it Lake Kipling, and I've changed it, fictionalized it. So I start with something real that I know, something factual, and then I build on that by using my imagination. The part about Croatia, of course, I've used my experiences of being there and then done some research about the places that I talk about in the book. And they are, again, the small towns that I mention are places that I've based on a real place, but changed it, and not only changed the name, but I've changed something about it, so it's not exactly the way the real place is. So starting with the real place, but then making a few changes.
So has your character ever been to the African lion safari near Hamilton?
She surprisingly did not mention going there, no. I've been there, but she hasn't mentioned it to me, no.
With your mysteries and the things that are happening, do you allow the reader to know it at the same time as your main character, or do your readers know ahead of time? How do you play with the timeline?
The reader sees things through the main character's eyes. So whatever she's doing, they're right there with her. in that first person. So she's talking about, it's written in the past tense, but she's talking about things that she's doing and the people she's interacting with. So they only see that. They don't get to see anything else that's going on, and they don't know if what she's telling them is the truth. That's the other thing, unreliable narrators. So they're seeing her point of view only there, and she tells the story, of course, the way she wants to tell it.
Do you have a subtext? Is there a meaning in the book or in the series, even if it happened organically? Is there some sort of point?
Yes. Well, of course, I want people to enjoy the story. So it's written for entertainment, first of all, but there's definitely, I started, when I first wrote, after retirement, I started writing poetry and then short stories. So I have a literary background as well. So to me, writing has to have a message. And the message in this story, the overall message of the series, I guess, would be the idea of redemption. Something has happened to this young woman in the past. She's made some bad choices, and she has to live with those. So going forward, if she can go forward, she's struggling to go forward, can she be forgiven? Can she forgive herself? And can she be redeemed? So I think that's the overall theme. As well, in The Dead Lie, there are other sub-themes of discrimination and prejudice. She's dealing with her parents' point of view towards other people, and she doesn't agree with it, but it's something that she's been raised with. So I try to bring in other themes that people could relate to, and things that they could see themselves so they could see themselves in the story, some broader issues.
So what did you get out of writing this series and this book, or what's it done for you?
Well, for me, it's, again, it's entertainment as the writer. I love to read. I've always loved to read. I've always wanted to be a writer. So now I'm living that dream after retiring from teaching for many years. I decided to pursue the hobby of writing. And so it began with poetry as a way to express my thoughts and feelings. And then I thought I had something more to tell, and so that became stories, and that developed into the novels. So when I write the novel, and because I'm a pantser, it also makes it more entertaining for me in the reading, because I'm going along, and then all of a sudden I will be reading and writing what's on the page, and I will say, "Oh, wow, I didn't see that coming." So there's entertainment value for me, as well as being able to express myself, and just the fun of telling a story and hoping that other people will enjoy it as well.
So what do you find the hardest thing to do when you're writing a book like this or a series? What's the most challenging?
Editing is tough for me. I'm pretty good to roll out the first drafts, or at least I've been so far with the books I have written. I'm able to put out the first draft fairly quickly without a lot of thought or a lot of having to outline. It just kind of comes out and flows. But then the tough part, of course, is going back to that original draft, which is not in very good shape, and making it into the best work that it can be. So I've struggled with editing. I'm getting better at that, though, so I definitely feel that I'm enjoying the editing process a little bit more than I originally did. At first, it was such a chore for me. I'd write that book and think, okay, I'm done now. But there's just so much more to writing a book than getting that first draft down. So going over it, it feels like it's hundreds of times, and I feel like I've memorized my stories by this point, that I've lived them. But I'm learning that the editing is not only necessary, but it's kind of fun getting in there and changing things, tweaking things so that the story is a better story for the reader.
Do you have a beta reader or a couple people that read this and then make their...
Yes. Well, my husband is my alpha reader, so he's the first one who gets to read the stories. And often, as we're going along, he'll come up with suggestions. So he starts, and I've had beta readers go through my work and offer their opinions, and those vary, of course. So you have to take the bits and pieces and see what's in common and do what you can with that. I have a couple of excellent critique partners as well, so they're very helpful in pinpointing exactly what things need to be taken out or what needs to be elaborated on.
Some of your more minor characters, smaller characters, where do they come from? Or do you hear them as well, or are they people that you've seen or someone you run across in your life and you kind of pick up some of their ways, or where do the smaller characters come from?
I'd say the other characters besides my main character are not anyone in particular. So they probably would be a mix of different people that I've met in my life, people in my life now, and probably even people I've read about or watched on TV or in movies. So just a mixture of my experiences with people, not anyone in particular.
Wow. Anybody you'd like to tell us about? Like the bad guy or do you kill off people in real life in your books?
No, actually, I can't say that I've done that.
Well, you can't say it, but you can tell us.
So far, that's not happened. No, they're based on, like I say, they're no one in particular, and I don't do that where I have a certain person that I have in mind and put them into a certain role. No.
Okay, if you don't want to tell us, that's fine.
No, they're just a figment of my imagination.
There you go. So where do you see yourself going with these books and with writing and stuff? Is it turning out the way you expected it?
Well, as I said, I started with after retirement, so I always wanted to write. So I'm kind of living that childhood dream now after retirement. Started with poetry and then short stories, and that great novel I wanted to write. Well, there we go. I wrote one. I've actually written 8 novels at this point. So going forward, I have the 5 books in this series. I have the next one coming out in February. And then I also have another series with a 3-book contract. So the first book is out and the second one's coming in October. So I'm going forward with that. And then I've written another book, which is with my agent. And I've started a 4th series. So my head's kind of all over the place trying to deal with all these people I've created. And hopefully I will be able to go forward I would love to be able to do more than just the 2 series, but I guess we'll see where that ends up.
Sounds like you're busy, going all over the place.
Exactly.
So who are your influences, or do you have some influences out there?
Oh, lots, and it's really hard to narrow it down to 1 or 2. I would say that growing up, it was I read a lot in the mystery genre. So, the usual Agatha Christie, Hardy Boys, and Phyllis A. Whitney is another I remember. Anything in the mystery suspense genre I would have enjoyed as a child. And then through high school and university, I studied literature, so I got my degree in English and French literature. So one of my favorite books would be Wuthering Heights, for instance. Little Women is another one. But as an adult, I've continued to enjoy mysteries, thrillers, suspense books, anything along that line. And so I would say authors like Janet Ivanovich I really admire, and Canadian author Linwood Barclay and Sherry Lapina. So many. I mean, I could name 100 different authors who I admire and who've influenced me. I've become a writer because of all of those authors that I've read in the past.
And of course, Michael Hawley.
Of course.
Of course.
Don't forget.
They say you can't name them all. There's just so many.
No, but you don't have to mention his name. He's the one for everyone, right?
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we appreciate you being here. So let's talk about how people get a hold of you. Do you have a website, social media? What's your interaction with readers? I
have a website, and that's probably the best place to go to. It's just simply ivankafear.com, and you can connect there to my social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, or X, and Instagram every day. And those connections can be made if you go onto my website, you can connect to my social media from there. Also, I have a newsletter that I put out several times a year. So there's a sign up on my website. So that's where I would direct people to go.
Well, fantastic. We will put that up on our site as well so people have access to it easily. And we appreciate it. So your first 2 books of this series is out. And of course, it's the Blue Water Mystery. And the newest book is Lost Like Me, I believe. And the first one was The Dead Lie. Ivanka Fair, thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity.
Great speaking with you.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.